Alright, I have built an assassin, so now it is time to review the assassin ascendancy. Let's go ahead and get started with Mistwalker. Gain elusive on critical strike, 50% increase effect of elusive. You take no extra damage from critical strikes. I enjoy this node, but it is nothing spectacular. You can get elusive from Withering Step, so basically the gain elusive is just a nice to have because you can get it elsewhere. So let's say you're a trickster and you want elusive, just put on Withering Step and now you have elusive. So the gain elusive on critical strike is not that great. 50% increase effect of elusive strike is pretty great, as is take no extra damage from critical strikes while elusive. You can use that take no extra damage from critical strikes while elusive in a lot of different ways. The thing that comes to my mind first off is the Timeless Keystone, I forget what it's called, Dance with Death. You can't use a helmet, but your critical strikes are lucky, and the damage on the critical strikes is lucky. Now, with that, you also take unlucky critical strike damage against you. So if you take this node, you take no extra damage from critical strikes, so that unlucky critical strike damage is mitigated. But on that note, this is just a C. It used to be an A back when elusive effect was a bit bugged, because elusive effect, if you read the text at the bottom, it says if you already have elusive buff, you cannot gain elusive buff. But a few years ago, or months ago, or days ago, I don't know, time doesn't work for me, but a while ago, there was a bug or an unintended interaction with Withering Step, where when you would cast Withering Step, it would refresh the elusive. So if you have 300% elusive effect, you would bounce between 200% and 300% and never really go to 0. That put this node at about an S tier for the bugged interaction. And then you pair that with Nightblade support, which gives you crit multi and a bunch of other stuff based on your elusive effect. It was really strong and really overpowered, and they removed that interaction, which kind of relegated the assassin to a unused ascendancy. Now, that is not to say the assassin is a bad ascendancy. The assassin is a pretty solid ascendancy across the board. It just has a couple things that are preventing it from being used. So I rank Mistwalker at a C. It is average across the board. It's good. If you take it, you're not really going to be sad or upset about taking it. It doesn't create that fourth node problem that a lot of ascendancies have, where you don't know what to pick for your fourth node. The assassin is excellent for that, because almost no matter what builds you take, you have a pretty good solid 4 nodes to take, and all 4 are going to be useless. So Mistwalker, we're putting at a C. Unstable Infusion, 10% chance to gain a power charge on critical strike, 20% chance to gain power charge on non-critical strike, +1 to maximum power charges. Now, the only thing that's really useful here is the +1 to maximum power charges, because if you're using power charges, you're already going to be using power charge support, which is going to give you your power charges. So the top 2 are kind of pointless, unless for some reason you aren't using power charge support, but everyone who's using power charges is using power charge support. It's just more damage and power charges and crit. It's everything you need. So this is pretty much, you can look at it as +1 to maximum power charges. Now, how valuable is +1 to maximum power charges in relation to other things? For instance, if you had to choose between +1 to maximum power charges or 25% more damage, what are you gonna pick? You're gonna pick 25% more damage. So this node here, I'm relegating to a C. Now, if there was less ways to get maximum power charges, and if there was less ways to gain power charges, this would be higher up. For instance, if this was +1 to maximum frenzy charges, and it had the ability to gain frenzy charges up at the top, this would move to a B. But since it's power charges are easy to come by, and maximum power charges are easy to come by, this is going into a C. Now, the next one is going to actually lower than a C, in my opinion. This one is a D. Because if you're doing power charge stacking, you're already likely going to be at 100% crit. So this 1.5 critical strike chance while at maximum power charges probably is not that useful to you, because you're already going to be at 100% crit. Now, that's not all of the time. Sometimes you won't be at 100% crit, but a lot of the time you're already going to be massively critting. And you can also just use the mark, Assassin's mark, to gain that 1.5. But this will get you to 100% crit. Maybe it's a C, but in my opinion, if you had to pick between 1.5 critical strike chance while at maximum critical strikes, and then 5% crit multi per power charge, or 25% more damage, I would always pick the 25% more damage. So I am giving this one a D for that. Now, as the game progresses and changes, items become available that weren't otherwise available, and the increase in gear kind of has the ability to diminish an Ascendency as the Ascendency gets older, because there's parts of gear that sometimes get released that diminish the power of Ascendency nodes. That being said, let's move on. Opportunistic. Damage from your critical strikes cannot be reflected. This is useless because all reflect damage basically instantly kills you. So, unless you have 100% crit chance right out the gate without needing to stack up power charges, if you go into a map that has reflect damage and you're not at 100% crit, you die instantly. You're not going to be able to build up the power charges to get you to 100% crit to get this reflected damage mitigation. Now, in my opinion, this either needs to be removed or retooled or reworked. I would say just 50% reduced damage of reflected damage. If you just put it at 50%, then you can take the Pantheon node and get yourself 100%, and it's a good way to remove critical strike damage. But that being said, this is already a S rank passive. This is S rank across the board. 25% more damage while there is at most one rare or unique enemy nearby. And I'm pretty sure that means that it's 25% more damage if there are no rares and uniques nearby, because at most it's 1, meaning if it's 0, that's less than at most. I haven't tested it, but based on the wording, you should be getting 25% more damage at all times unless there's more than one unique or rare enemy, in which case you get 20% reduced damage taken while there are 2 or more, or there are at least 2 rare or unique enemies nearby. Now this is fantastic. This is S tier across the board. I don't think any assassin is not going to take this node. This is an S tier node, 25% more damage without a drawback, or 20% reduced damage without a drawback. Neither of these really have a drawback, and in this instance, it makes perfect sense on why you would want it to switch. Let's say you're fighting a huge pack with like 5 unique rares in there, or uniques or rares, and you're in some serious shit, and you're in danger. You want that 20% reduced damage taken so you don't die. But let's say you're fighting an uber boss and you want to do more damage to get that fight over quickly. That 25% more damage, because there's only one enemy around, is excellent. S tier across the board. Now this bad boy, ambush and assassinate. D tier, I shouldn't even talk about it anymore, but let's go. 15% more damage with hits and elements against enemies that are on low life. Low life means 50% of damage. So what this actually is, if you want to look at it that way, is 7% or 7.5% more damage. Now this node gives you 25% more damage. This one gives you 7.5% more damage. Critical strikes have Culling Strike, which kills enemies below 10% life, which reversely synergizes with the 15% more damage with hits and elements against enemies that are on low life. I'm skipping around and reading the bottom one. Let's restart and not skip around. Alright, the top one, 7.5% more damage. That's pretty lame. It's nice that it says hits and elements, but that's not good. 40% to a critical strike multiplier against enemies that are on full life. If you play on multiplayer, or you have anything that's going to hit an enemy and reduce its life before you get there, it completely disables this. It's situational. It's kind of trash. It fits the assassin theme, hitting things at full life and then killing them and assassinating them. But for this to be useful, that should be 100%. Maybe even 200% crit multi. It's just not powerful enough. 100% more critical strike chance against enemies that are on full life. Same situation as above, but if those numbers were upped up to the point where you could actually assassinate things, it gives you enough damage bonus so you can assassinate things, it would go up. 100% more critical strike chance against enemies that are on low life. And critical strike chance has culling strike. So if you wanted to like package this into a whole deal, this is probably somewhere between 15 and 20% more damage. Now, I might be a little harsh on this, but I kind of just hate everything about this node, so it gets a D. This is a D for me, and I haven't checked POE Ninja. I don't want that to influence my opinion, so I'm not going to check it, but I imagine that most assassins are probably not taking this node. So as I was saying, one thing that this game has a bit of a problem with some of the Ascendencies is the 4th node problem. What do you select for your 4th node? The assassin doesn't really have that problem because you're either going to go here and then obviously select that and that, or you're going to go here and select that and that. These two are pretty frequently grabbed, but if you're going this way, you can also go here instead of grabbing this elusive if you don't want the elusive. So you have no 4th node problem. But if we switch this over to a trickster, I have this a saboteur. I have this zoomed in a lot just so you can see it better. Let's say I want to do a hipster saboteur shockwave cyclone build using that maze with high damage. I'm using this example because that is what I actually wanted to do. What nodes can you take? This node, I'm doing physical damage, so it does nothing. This node, I'm not using mines, so I can't go this way because I'm not using mines or traps. So I have this node for the cooldown recovery, which is excellent for shockwave. I have this node here, more area damage, less area damage, situational on the 20%, less area damage, so you can't rely on it for solid defenses, but it's nice to have. And then this one right here. And then from here, you're stuck. If you're not using spells that can be triggered with trigger bots, you can't grab that. If you're not doing elemental damage, you can't really grab this unless you have something that shocks, burns, and ignites. But because of this, you're kind of stuck with this limbo where you only have 3 nodes to take, and this has really diminished the quality of the Saboteur for me. And the Chieftain is in the same boat. There's a few other Ascendancies that has this problem. You select 3, and then your 4th selection is just because you have to select a 4th one. And the Assassin does not have that problem. Now, D tier, Ambush and Assassinate. Noxious Strike. 40% chance to poison on hit, 5% increased poison duration for each poison you have inflicted recently, up to 100%. Recover 5% of life per poison affecting enemy you kill. Now, this one is good, but it's not great. It's getting a middle of the road C tier from me. Now, if you want to bump this up to a higher than a C, not saying you have to, but if you wanted to, given that the Assassin is an underplayed class, I see no problem with moving that 40% chance to poison on hit to 100%. This isn't going to break the node. It isn't going to make it so overpowered that everyone's going to play an Assassin, because it's limited to just poison builds. And 100% chance to poison on hit will open up a lot of different build varieties and make it a lot easier to do poison damage without needing to spec into chance to poison too much. So I think there's no problem moving that to 100% chance to poison on hit. If you want to get willy-nilly, you can move it to 80, and then you got that 20%, which you can grab elsewhere really easy. Now, this 5% increased poison duration for each enemy poisoned if you have inflicted recently, up to a maximum of 100%. That's perfectly fine. It's a little anti-thematic for the Assassin, because the Assassin is supposed to be assassinating a single target. At least that's how I view it. The Slayer is for things that hit a lot of enemies and are slaying a bunch of enemies and stacking up deaths and murder. Assassin should be single target focused, and instead of doing 5% increased duration for each poison you have inflicted recently, up to a maximum of 100%, they should retool this a little bit to focus on single target damage, where you want that a poison to be more effective. So it could be something like 20% increased poison duration on enemies that are farther away from other enemies, so that way when you fight a boss, that boss is taking increased poison duration because he's all by himself getting assassinated. But again, I don't really have a problem with this node. It's pretty excellent. Recover 5% of life per poison affected on enemies you kill. It's it's just fine. It's really good for leveling up, but beyond that, it's just fine. This is getting a C tier. It's just kind of average. You have to path into it to get to the next one, which is going to be Toxic Delivery. Poisons you inflict with critical strikes deal 25% more damage, and you get a 0.5% critical strike chance per poison, affecting enemy up to 2%. So this is going to fix your crit chance. It runs into a similar problem, but not nearly as bad as this node here, because this node here, you're already kind of forced into getting power charges. You don't necessarily need power charges for Toxic Delivery, so this 2% is a lot more beneficial than this 1.5% down here. It's just more beneficial because you don't necessarily need to be using power charges. So this one is getting a B from me. I wouldn't really change anything about this. I think it's just fine as it is, but if you were to add a little bit more to spice up the assassin, you could do something like, to make it interesting, when an enemy dies while poisoned, it explodes and passes its poison on to other enemies, but that might interact differently, too similarly to the Pathfinder's poison node, which I can't remember off the top of my head. So let's go to the Pathfinder, which has a poison prolif. Pathfinder, you are this one, your poison prolif. When you kill a poison enemy during any flask effect, nearby enemies are poisoned. Poisons you inflict during any flask effect have 20% chance to deal 100% more damage. So this is just kind of a better poison node for that type of idea. So they probably don't want to get too similar to that. So let's go back to the assassin. Now, one of the reasons that I'm not giving this an A, because, I mean, realistically, this is an A tier node. It is really strong. The reason I'm not necessarily giving it an A is it pigeonholes you into a crit poison build. You have to do crit poison in order for this to work. So it really limits the build choice. It's just pigeonholing you down to using a poison skill that crits. And when you do a poison skill that crits, you could probably take Perfect Agony pretty well if you're going to be doing, well, poison is an ailment, so you're probably going to be taking Perfect Agony. It's just a little too pigeonholy and not broad enough for my taste, so it gets a B, and a B is still a high score. A B is above average. It's pretty good. So let's take a look at how I ranked the assassin and my thumbnail. We have a C, C, D, S, D, C, B. Now this is a solid assassin, a solid build across the board. Why it has so low playing numbers is probably simply because of how limited it is in build variety because of those poison options. Now they can expand the build variety by removing those poison options, or at least allowing those poison options to be applied more effectively to differing build types. But across the board, I really don't think the assassin needs a rework. Fix this D node here. Maybe modify this C node so you can get 100% chance to poison on hit. And add something that's a little, not crit chance related, but some type of cool effect. Like when you deal a critical strike, give a bunch of buffs. Like maybe you can have a consecutive critical strike buff. Every time you critical strike, following a critical strike, you gain 1% increased damage, 1% increased movement speed, 1% increased energy shield, 1% increased effect of elusive. Something along those lines. So that way, as you're critting, and you get a bunch of crits in a row, this starts to stack up, and you can set a cap on it. And it'll just be a more fun and engaging way to interact with the assassin using a crit-based build. Now, after I have talked about the assassin, and the reason I'm talking about the assassin is I am building an assassin to do Sanctum. My favorite build, it's probably my favorite build in the game, is Exsanguinate with Awakened Spell Echo and Awakened Chain. These two are very expensive, especially Awakened Spell Echo, so this is not a cheap setup that I got going on here, simply because those two are very expensive, but you can use the non-awakened versions and get a similar effect, but not a same effect. So I'm just going to run a map, I forgot I already grabbed one, and show you the Assassin Toolkit. kind of properly utilized. It's using Exsanguinate, crit. Let's take a look at my skill tree before I run it. I'm doing the elusive effect. This is really nice for the movement speed. As you see, I don't have a movement speed flask because if I get a movement speed shrine, it's too much for me to control and it's just too fast. I'm obviously grabbing Opportunistic because this is my S class, and then I'm going with this, I think C and D. I'm grabbing all of these simply because I'm going power charges. And along with going power charges, I'm also using Awaken Brutality. And that prevents poisons from doing damage, so I can't go up the poison route. Now I can remove this Awaken Brutality and go the poison route instead of the power charge route, but I don't really want to do that. I am grabbing this one here, so I just kind of perpetually gain flash charges. And then I'm grabbing my favorite node. Oh, I don't even have a jewel in there. I am grabbing my favorite node one step ahead, just so I can avoid, stuns, being frozen, and I have better action speed. And that enables me to run this flask here, which is going to give me endurance charges, which are going to help for my physical damage mitigation. So let's just grab a simple jewel. Do I have Corrupted Blood? I don't know if I have Corrupted Blood immunity. Does it even say? I don't know if it even says you get Corrupted Blood immunity in your toolkit. I don't see anything that says anything about Corrupted Blood. So I'm just going to assume I don't have Corrupted Blood and pop that on there for Corrupted Blood immunity, because I don't think I have it anywhere else. Yeah, I don't have it anywhere else. And let's go ahead and take a look at my full toolkit. In my Enlightened support node here, we have Herald of Purity for more physical damage, Arrogance support, and Vitality. And with this Vitality, I still don't have enough life regeneration to sustain Exsanguinate. If you see my life diminishing, it will decline to the point where I can no longer cast it. That is a problem I need to solve, but I am only at level 90, so I will be solving that by the time I get up to 95, which is where I usually stop my characters. And this pair of gloves gives me Impel with my spells. When I crit, it synergizes with the Assassin very well. I'm using a dual Void Battery. In my opinion, in this game, if you want to get a build to easily get to 3 million damage, do all content, Assassin is one of the best choices. Let's take a look at these Void Batteries. I don't have Awaken POE trade up. Let's pop this up real quick. These Void Batteries are pretty high rolled. If you look at it, they have a perfect cast speed and pretty high on the crit. So I paid, I think like 20 C for each of these, but you can get these much cheaper if you lower your standards. See, 15 Chaos, and Badge of the Brotherhood. Let's just go with a Divine. Let's get rid of this overcharge. Badge of the Brotherhood. 90 Chaos. And again, this is a relatively high rolled Badge of the Brotherhood because I have that 10% increase elusive effect per power charge. And I believe I'm at 8 power charges with these Void Batteries. I don't have any special rings that give power charge. I'm using this one so enemies' damage against me is unlucky if I'm on low life. Really like this ring, but I also got a Bleeding Cannot Be Inflicted on You, so this fixes my bleeding. And I got Tattoos to fix my poison. One step ahead to fix my stun. I shouldn't be able to get stunned or anything like that. So my defenses are pretty solid. I made a video earlier, which is fully blocked by YouTube because I played a bunch of 80s music while playing it. And I was trying to level up with dishonest defenses, but that's neither here nor there. So let's take a look at the Assassin kit on display. Now just imagine you playing it and modifying it however you see fit. You might want a movement speed flask because you can handle the speed, but me as an old man, I can't handle that speed. I ain't Top Gun, I ain't Maverick, I ain't Goose, I ain't Iceman. I'm the old man who fucking sells them fruit on a fruit stand on the side of the road. That me right there. I ain't nothing special. I'm running Grace and Pride. I could run Determination, but I don't really feel I need to. Why I like this build is it's just so smooth at clearing. That Awaken Chain and Awaken Spell Echo makes the casting and clearing just ultra fast. And I use Frenzy to keep my Frenzy charges up. because I don't really need any extra skill slots, and it's not that much of a hindrance to just throw a 4-link frenzy on there. See, you can kind of melt bosses pretty good. Is a tier 16 boss that just got instantly melted. And by instantly, I mean not instantly, obviously. And room clear is really good. You pop open a door, you hit it with Exsanguinate, and it just clears the room. Exsanguinate, I think, is a bit OP in terms of skills because it starts with a physical base and has a very high damage. If you compare the damage of Exsanguinate to something like Ethereal Knives, the damage on Exsanguinate is significantly higher. Now that does not mean Ethereal Knives is bad, because with Ethereal Knives you have projectiles in the tag, so you can do a bunch of projectile stuff that you can't do with Exsanguinate. But if you ain't going to be messing with projectiles, then you don't need to mess with Ethereal Knives. Sorry, fighting triple bosses here while trying to talk, and almost ran out of frenzy charges. Alright, they are down. Do I have... yeah, I have my curse on my Frostblink, so I got a Frostblink on these boys. Build up your frenzy charges, Frostblink to put the curse on, and then go ham. Now I like to use Droxix as a litmus test for damage, because he does this little phase, this phase right here, and it's really good to... you know, well, I ran out of frenzy charges. Let me pump up frenzy charges again. It's really good to use that to do like a damage test. See, you can see how much damage I'm doing. Of course, I have Maven on, so Maven's causing a bit of a problem. You can see the damage is pretty solid. But I run out of life, which is a big problem. If I get hit by anything, I'm at 0 life, and I would die. Well, anything chaos damage related. So I need to fix the life thing, but as you saw, that is a pretty smooth experience. Now let's finish up this map a little bit. You can see my movement speed, so let's pump up the frenzy charges to get my full movement speed when I have my frenzy charges. So here's my movement speed, no movement speed flash, just that. And now let's grab elusive effect. I got a crit. Now I'm at elusive effect. So this is my just like base movement speed, no flask, slowly diminishes with elusive effect. But you can be pretty quick, and if you pop a movement speed flask on there, you're going full turbo mode. It's a little too fast for me. I get a little motion sickness, so going that fast is too much for me. But if you really want to go turbo, that's the way to do it. But if you really want to go turbo, that lightning warp tornado shot build looks nutty. I could never play that for very long. I would get sick to my stomach. Across the board, just barf-tastic on everything. But I think this might be my favorite build in the game at the moment, simply because Exsanguinate is just so powerful. It's good for bossing, and it's good for clear. A lot of people use Reap because you can get more damage on single targets with Reap, but I just don't like Reap nearly as much as Exsanguinate. Oh, I also have the Jizz Exsanguinate MTX, which I did not apply for this demo. Alright, that is the video. Let's take a look at my... did I close my image? No, here it is. My ranking again. Now, each one of these is subject to a tier up or down, depending on the situation, but this is where I go. For instance, this is an S tier. Maybe it should go down to an A tier, but I love this node. I think it's excellent. I think every node should, at minimum, have equivalent power, if it's going to be an offensive node, to 20% more damage. Now, this is 25% more damage, so it does above what I consider to be the minimal acceptable damage for an Ascendency node. Now, I say 20% because that's kind of what the Slayer gets, and the Berserker gets 40% with a 10% more damage taken a penalty on there. So you remove that 10% penalty, cut the damage in half. 20% is kind of what I'm looking for a solid A tier node. And it's above 20%, so it's getting S. This one here that's getting a D, it's probably well below 20% in most cases, so it's getting a D. And you don't get a lot of benefit from this node. That is the Assassin's Toolkit. I think one of the reasons the Assassin is so low is just the limiting build variety options, because you either have to go power charges or you have to go poison. If you're not going power charges and you're not going poison, you're not going assassin. So you are limited to those options. But with that toolkit, void batteries are cheap, and the power you get from a void battery is stupendous. It is incredible. It cannot be undersold, the power you get from a void battery with power charges. I forgot to check how many power charges I got. Y'all saw, I think it was 8. And if you get some rings with +1 to power charges, I have 1 ring in there, but it is the worst ring you can get to have power charges on. One of these bad boys. +1 to, oh, that's Maximum Frenzy. I don't even think I got a ring with maximum power charges, but this is also a pretty shit ring to get Maximum Frenzy charges on. But anyways, that is the Assassin review. I